Many of us have read the 23rd Psalm. There's a verse in there that strikes me often. Even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And those words, even when I walk through the valley, have come as a great encouragement to me time and time again when I find myself in that valley, that God does not leave us there, but instead God leads us through that dark and difficult valley in our life. So often we are encouraged by thoughts such as this, and we pray that those dark and difficult days that we find ourselves in those valleys would be short and that God would quickly lead us through. But the reality is, that's where the real work of ministry happens. And so often that is where we receive the calling from the Lord and that clarity of the purpose that He has for us. It's in the valley, not on the mountaintop. I think often of the transfiguration of Jesus when God's glory shone down upon Him and those three that were there with Jesus on that day. The only three disciples that were allowed to be with Jesus, Peter, James, and John. That mountaintop experience that I'm sure they would have dwelt in for the rest of their life if they only could. But you see, God did not allow them to dwell on that mountaintop. Instead, those same three, Peter, James, and John, were the only three invited deep into the Garden of Gethsemane to experience the sorrow, the grief, and the difficulty that Jesus was facing as He prepared to go to the cross for our sin. Peter, James, and John did not remain on the mountaintop and in that experience, but instead they were invited into the valley. And in that dark and difficult valley, that Garden of Gethsemane, that is where Jesus was truly and completely and fully the Messiah, preparing for His purpose in life. And I believe that it was in that garden where Peter, James, and John, watching Jesus, experienced God's calling on their life, perhaps in the clearest and most fullest way than ever before that point. So as we dwell on that verse of Psalm 23, even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Maybe you find yourself in a valley right now. Rather than searching for that point where you will escape, rather than looking forward to that mountaintop experience that God has for you, dwell with Jesus, who is right there with you. Draw close to Him and listen for His voice. Could it be that perhaps today, in the midst of that valley, God is calling you? Could it be that today, in the midst of that valley, God is purifying you? Could it be that today, in the midst of that valley, God is giving you clarity for the mission that He has in store for you?